All right, so you know how we've been looking at Bitcoin? Well, you sent over a ton of research on a potential bull market in 2025.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really fascinating stuff. You ready to kind of unpack it all and see what we find?
Absolutely. Let's dive in. I think what jumps out at me right away is just the way the global economic picture is framing the whole conversation around Bitcoin. It's not just about the tech anymore.
Right. It's like all the inflation worries, concerns about traditional currencies. It feels like a lot of these articles are kind of positioning Bitcoin as this digital safe haven.
That's right.
Almost like a modern day gold rush, but, online.
I think it's an interesting comparison. When you see institutions like BlackRock, Fidelity, launching Bitcoin ETFs and attracting huge amounts of capital, it really does feel like a shift in mindset.
Totally. Like, remember how skeptical everyone was just a few years ago?
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just them, right? We're seeing like traditional finance giants.
Right.
JPMorgan, Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
They're dipping their toes into the crypto waters too. What do you think is driving this change of heart? Is it just portfolio diversification, or is there something more to it?
I think it's a combination of factors. Of course, diversification's a part of it. But there's also this growing understanding that Bitcoin represents a fundamentally different kind of asset. It's decentralized, it's got a fixed supply, and operates independently of any government or central bank.
Right.
In a world facing economic uncertainty, those features start to look pretty appealing.
Yeah, it's like they're hedging their bets against the very system that they're a part of.
Exactly.
And then on top of all that, you throw in the upcoming Bitcoin halving event in 2024.
That's right. And it's not just about hype either.
Right.
When you look at what happened after previous halving events, there's a pretty clear pattern. Like 2016, for example, the halving happened in July. And within a year, Bitcoin's price went from around $650 to almost $20,000.
Wow.
And then again, in 2020, after the May halving, the price surged from around $9,000 to over $64,000 by April 2021.
Okay, so those are some serious jumps.
Yeah.
But like from a technical perspective, how does the halving even impact, Bitcoin's code and its ability to kind of control inflation?
So the halving is actually coded into Bitcoin's DNA. It's like built in.
Okay.
And it happens automatically every 210,000 blocks.
Okay.
Which is roughly every 4 years. And what it does is cut the reward that miners receive for validating transactions in half. So that reduction in the rate at which new Bitcoin enters circulation creates a supply shock, essentially, making the existing Bitcoin more scarce.
Okay, so it's not just speculation then.
No.
There's an actual fundamental shift happening within the system.
And if historical patterns are anything to go by,
the
2024 halving could be a major catalyst for another price surge. But it's not the only factor, of course.
Right, you're right. There's other things happening that could add fuel to the fire or, maybe even throw water on it.
Yeah.
Like regulation. A lot of the research you sent touched on how clearer guidelines could actually boost investor confidence.
Absolutely, yeah. For a long time, the lack of regulatory clarity has been a major barrier to institutional adoption.
Right.
If governments start providing clear frameworks outlining how they view and intend to regulate cryptocurrencies, I think it could make a world of difference.
Especially for those big institutions that are so used to operating within, it's a very specific set of rules. It's like they need that permission slip before they jump in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even the emergence of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, could play a role here.
Okay.
While they're not the same as, decentralized cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, their arrival could indirectly benefit the whole crypto space.
How so?
Well, think about it this way. When ebooks first came out, people were hesitant. But as they became more popular, it paved the way for wider acceptance of things like audiobooks. It's about familiarity, comfort with the digital realm.
It's like expanding the whole pie, not just one slice.
Exactly.
And then you have examples like El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as legal tender.
Right.
It's still early days,
Yeah.
but that move has definitely sparked conversations about other countries potentially following suit.
No doubt. If even a handful of other countries were to follow El Salvador's lead, I think it would send a powerful signal about Bitcoin's growing legitimacy on the world stage.
And that brings us to another piece of the puzzle. the technology itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of the research focused on advancements like the Lightning Network and how it's making Bitcoin transactions faster and cheaper.
Right.
But let's go beyond the basics here.
Yeah.
What are the wider implications of something like the Lightning Network?
Well, the Lightning Network is more than just making things faster.
It's unlocking a whole new level of functionality. Think about things like micropayments, for example. Suddenly you can use Bitcoin to pay for things like online content or small subscriptions without high fees eating into the transaction.
Interesting.
It also has the potential to revolutionize cross-border payments, making them instant and significantly cheaper.
That's incredible. It's almost like we're witnessing the birth of a parallel financial system that operates outside the constraints of traditional banking.
It's an exciting time to be watching this space.
Yeah.
But before we get too carried away with the possibilities, it's important to acknowledge that there are risks and challenges too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got this, exciting potential, but also this need for caution. What are some of the things that could really derail this whole Bitcoin train, even with all these positive factors we've been talking about?
Well, I think regulation's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
While clearer guidelines could be a boon, there's always the risk of governments, cracking down and imposing restrictions that stifle innovation or make it difficult for people to access and use Bitcoin.
It's like walking a tightrope.
Yeah.
Too much regulation and it becomes inaccessible.
Right.
But too little and it could become a haven for illicit activity.
Exactly.
What about from a security standpoint? Some of the articles mention concerns about vulnerabilities and hacks.
Yeah, security is paramount, and it's an ongoing battle. While the underlying blockchain technology is incredibly secure, vulnerabilities can exist in the exchanges, wallets, and other platforms that people use to interact with Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen some pretty high-profile hacks in the past,
Right.
and those events can really erode confidence and impact the price.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like having this impenetrable vault.
Yeah.
But if the key gets stolen, the contents are still vulnerable.
Exactly.
What about the inherent volatility of cryptocurrency?
Yeah.
Bitcoin is notorious for its price swings.
Right.
Is that something that could also dampen the potential for a bull market?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Volatility is a double-edged sword.
Okay.
On the one hand, it creates opportunities for traders to profit from price fluctuations.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, it can be pretty unnerving for long-term investors.
Right.
And make it difficult for businesses to adopt Bitcoin as a payment method if the value is constantly fluctuating.
So a wild ride can be exciting.
Yeah.
But it also makes it hard to plan for the future.
Exactly.
And then there's the competition.
Right.
Bitcoin might be the most well-known cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
But it's not the only one out there. Could that impact its dominance?
That's a valid point. The crypto space is incredibly dynamic, with thousands of other cryptocurrencies vying for attention and investment.
Right.
Some of these newer projects offer features or capabilities that Bitcoin doesn't, which could attract developers, users, and ultimately capital. It's a constantly evolving ecosystem.
So it's not enough to just focus on Bitcoin in isolation. We need to consider the broader landscape and how it might influence its trajectory. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of the more specific developments that could shape the market in the lead up to the 2024 halving. The potential approval of a spot Bitcoin ETF in the U.S. was a hot topic in a lot of the research.
Oh yeah, a spot Bitcoin ETF would be a major milestone for the industry.
Okay.
It would allow investors to easily gain exposure to Bitcoin through traditional brokerage accounts without having to directly own and manage the underlying asset.
Mm-hmm.
This could attract a whole wave of new investment from both individuals and institutions that have been hesitant to dive into the crypto world directly.
It seems like it would make it a lot more accessible
Oh, absolutely.
to the average investor.
Yeah.
But why has it been so difficult to get a spot Bitcoin ETF approved in the U.S.?
Well, regulatory concerns have been the main obstacle.
Okay.
The SEC, which is responsible for approving ETFs, has expressed concerns about things like market manipulation, custody security, and investor protection in the crypto space. However, the recent approval of Bitcoin futures ETFs is a positive sign.
Okay.
And a lot of people believe it paves the way for spot ETFs to follow.
So it's like dipping their toes in the water before taking the full plunge. And speaking of advancements, what about those layer 2 solutions like the Lightning Network?
Yeah.
How could those influence Bitcoin's growth in the coming months and years?
Well, the Lightning Network is really key to making Bitcoin more scalable and usable for everyday transactions.
Right.
by enabling faster and cheaper transactions.
Yeah.
It opens up a whole range of possibilities. We're already seeing it being used for things like micropayments, remittances, and even in some retail settings.
It's like taking something that was initially designed for these large-scale transactions and making it accessible to anyone, anywhere.
Yeah.
And then there's this whole world of decentralized finance, or DeFi.
Right.
A lot of the research talked about Bitcoin's potential role in this emerging space.
Yeah, DeFi is all about building financial applications on top of blockchain technology without the need for traditional intermediaries like banks.
Right.
Bitcoin, as the oldest and most established cryptocurrency, has the potential to play a really central role in this ecosystem. We're already seeing the development of platforms that allow people to lend, borrow, and earn interest on their Bitcoin holdings in a decentralized manner.
It's like taking the power of finance and putting it back into the hands of individuals.
Exactly.
It's both empowering and potentially disruptive.
It is.
But before we dive even deeper into this,
Yeah.
let's take a step back and consider the global economic context.
Right. Yeah, it really is. You know, it's almost like the backdrop against which this whole Bitcoin drama is unfolding. You've got persistent inflation, geopolitical tensions, this growing distrust in traditional financial systems. All of these factors could drive people toward alternative assets, like Bitcoin.
It's like seeking shelter when the storm is brewing.
Right.
You know, people naturally look for something stable and secure when they feel like everything else is shaky.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin, with its decentralized nature and that fixed supply, offers that level of protection against, you know, the whims of governments and central banks. But of course, it's not a silver bullet.
Right.
And there's no guarantee that it will always be a safe haven.
It's true. And I think it's important to remember that Bitcoin's still a relatively new asset class.
Yeah.
And its future is uncertain. You know, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
From
the macroeconomic forces to these technological advancements, the potential rewards, the risks.
It's a lot to consider.
But ultimately, the decision of whether or not to invest in Bitcoin, that's a personal one.
Absolutely. There's no right or wrong answer. What makes sense for one person might not for another.
Right.
It really comes down to individual circumstances, you know.
Yeah.
Risk tolerance and investment goals.
Totally. So as we wrap up here, let's turn the focus back to you, the listener. What are your biggest takeaways from all of this?
Yeah. What parts of Bitcoin's potential future excite you the most? And what concerns you the most?
Right. And have you even thought about how these different factors we talked about, the halving, the regulation, you know, the technological adoption, how all of that might actually play out in your own investment strategy?
Exactly.
We've given you a lot to digest, but the real work starts now.
It does.
You know, take this knowledge, do your own research, and make informed decisions that align with your own personal financial goals.
And remember that the world of cryptocurrency is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
So it's crucial to stay informed, stay adaptable, and be open to new information. What's true today might be completely different tomorrow.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And also the challenge of this whole space. It's an ongoing learning experience. And the more you explore, the more you realize how much there still is to discover.
That's the truth.
So keep diving deep, keep asking those questions, and keep challenging those assumptions. The future of Bitcoin and the entire cryptocurrency landscape is still being written.
It is.
And it's a really exciting journey to be a part of. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Bitcoin.